So this slide takes the same activities we just saw and it organizes them according to where the activities might occur in a traditionally organized library. Oftentimes, the first two bullet points, collection development and acquisitions, and then cataloging, those two often fall under what's known as technical services or tech services. Notice that tech does not stand for technology, it stands for technical, which has more to do with the level of specialization of the practitioners than it does with how high-tech the equipment is that they use. The third bullet point includes public services, especially reference and circulation, since circulation usually handles shelving and physical organization. So here we see that activities 1 and 3, identifying the existence of resources, and then gathering resources into collections, is usually done by the collection development and acquisitions librarians. Collection development librarians, especially in academic and larger public libraries, usually specialize in one particular area. Sometimes they have an additional master's degree in something like performing arts or engineering or psychology. These are people who know something about the discipline, they know something about the needs of the target user population, and they also know quite intimately the library's past, current, and intended future holdings of resources in their subject area. Publishers will send subject-specific catalogs of new works to collection development librarians who will assess whether new publications should be added to the collection and or if older publications should be weeded out of the collection. The acquisitions librarian works with the collection development librarians to balance the overall library's acquisitions policy, which considers collection size, collection size, budget, and other factors. And the acquisitions librarian also knows what kinds of contracts and relationships the library has with different publishers. As book shipments are physically received at the library, the acquisitions department will probably take care of creating a skeletal record in the library system or even importing from their ordering system into their cataloging system, acknowledging that an ordered book has been received, and then they give it a barcode number and a status. And then they send it off to bullet number 2, cataloging. Once the item has been chosen for the library and received, the cataloging department undertakes steps 2, 4, and 5 of bibliographic control to enable library patrons to discover resources in the catalog by means of access points, which roughly correspond to descriptive metadata. And they also allow patrons to decide whether individual resources are worth looking into more deeply for their own information needs. So then in cataloging, the librarians prepare bibliographies, subject guides, and indexes and other navigational and access type resources suggested in step number 4. I would also say that it's not uncommon at all to see catalogers and reference librarians working together to create these kinds of access materials. And then in step 6, that's taken care of by the public services, and patrons or users can gain direct access to resources via the OPAC, which is the library catalog, the help of a reference librarian, and also the work of the people who do shelving. So looking again at our list of activities in their original order, you see highlighted the ones that are cataloging related activities. Bibliographic control is happening all over the library. It is somewhat frequently mischaracterized as being what catalogers do, but really librarians from many departments have their hands in bibliographic control. Although indeed the central line of bibliographic control work is done by catalogers, also, this might be a good time to point out to you that in very small libraries and in special libraries, there aren't these discrete departments that we've sort of been talking about in the past couple of slides, like there are in academic libraries and large public libraries or large, like very large corporate libraries. especially in the DC area, which is really rich with special libraries, and also in rural areas, which tend to have very, very small public libraries. You will have a staff of less than 10, or not infrequently, even less than 5 people doing all of these activities. Okay, so let's get more into the details. We've mentioned access points, and they're also discussed in Taylor and Jowdry. An access point is any element of a surrogate record that can be used to retrieve the entire record. Another way of saying that is that an access point is any metadata element that is searchable. For example, in our typical ISBD format for records in a library catalog, there's a metadata element for physical description that usually has the height of an item, and for books it'll have the number of pages. This is an example of a metadata element that is not an access point because most library catalogs will not let you search by height. On the other hand, title and subject are very common access points because they're the points that users might use to search and retrieve that record. So, in the creation or adoption of metadata schemas, one of the questions to ask is which metadata elements should be access points. As we learned in Bates, this decision should not be siloed. It should be made in concert with and communicated with whomever the people are who would have to implement the searchability of selected elements. Also, in order for access points to do what they are meant to do, which is to provide access to information resources by delivering surrogate records of resources that match a query. In order for access points to do that, for that function to operate properly, cataloging needs to be consistent. The crucial need for consistency is why so much of the reading you do about bibliographic control emphasizes being systematic. Go back and look at the first and second slides of this presentation with the definition of bibliographic control and the list of bibliographic control activities. It is not by accident that the word systematic or systematically appears several times. So the question on the slide is, how do we ensure record-to-record consistency with our surrogate records? Well, that's why we have content standards and authority files. What's an authority file? It's a resource for performing authority control. What is authority control? Well, let's move on to the next slide and find out. So authority control is the process by which the headings or terms used for an entry in a bibliographic record are controlled and consistent. Authority control serves two purposes. It co-locates synonyms and it differentiates homonyms. Both of these activities are forms of what we call vocabulary control. So in the examples on the slide, you see different forms that are synonyms for naming the 35th President of the United States. When it comes time to create a bibliographic record for a book that's by or about JFK, the cataloger has to choose which form of his name to use. Now, in some environments, there might be a content standard that describes how all names should be constructed. However, more commonly, you will see recommendations that the cataloger refer to an authority file to find the proper agreed-upon form of a name or concept. An authority file is just jargon for a list of preferred terms. So the Library of Congress maintains a name authority. They also maintain a subject authority. You might have heard of it before. It's the Library of Congress subject headings. Excuse me. So when a cataloger is left to fill out a record with the proper name or concept, they will refer to the appropriate authority file. I mentioned the Library of Congress authority files here, but there are dozens or even hundreds of others. Name authorities can be a little harder to get to on the open web, just because they're often internal and or proprietary. But a thesaurus, when used for the purpose of authority control, is just a subject authority. Now, the other purpose of authority control that's on the slide here is differentiation. It often happens that you have excuse me. It often happens that you have multiple concepts or people or places that have the same name. Again, consulting an authority file can allow the cataloger first to find out if there is more than one person with the name of the current author. And if so, the name authority will give the proper heading for showing that person's name while differentiating that person from someone with another name. In the example on the slide, I point out the WWF, which is an acronym that can refer to any of several organizations, but the two most notably that it refers to are the World Wildlife Fund and the World Wrestling Foundation. There was even a court case a few years ago where they went to court to find out who actually had the rights to use that acronym, and the World Wildlife Fund won that court case.